Welcome to Asia Outlook. I'm Melody and I'm here to report the top stories from around Asia. The COVID-19 outbreak is a major public health emergency that has spread fast in the country, causing the most extensive infections since the founding of the People's Republic of China. The epidemic is also the most difficult to contain in the country so far. President Xi Jinping took command of China's war against COVID-19. President Xi said, quote, "The Chinese nation has experienced many ordeals in its history, but it has never been overwhelmed. Instead, it has become more courageous and more mature, rising up from the hardships," end quote.
对这一次的疫情防控工作呢，我一直是在亲自指挥、亲自部署。
当国家需要我们的时候，是我们军人价值真正体现到的时候，我们义不容辞。
大家好，非常时期就不握手了，一定要有信心。没问题，一定可以克服这场疫情，
一定能打赢。
对中国人民来说啊，我们现在正在进行着一场严肃的斗争。中国政府呢是高度重视，因为政府的宗旨呢就是把人民的生命安全、身体健康放在最高位置上。
在这里呢，我代表党中央，向你们，也向全国在抗击疫情战斗中的医护工作者，致以崇高的敬意和衷心的感谢。
我们一定要牢记领袖的嘱托，力争在最短的时间内，将我们正在研制的重组新冠疫苗推向临床，推向应用。
想挣钱，还想健康，
那肯定卯足了劲儿啊！早就想上班，
从来没有休过这么长的假期，积蓄力量吧，专心的投入到工作当中。
我相信啊，只要我们坚定信心，同舟共济，科学防治，精准施策，我们一定会战胜这一次的疫情。
The World Health Organization says new data is helping the scientific community better understand the new coronavirus, and it is still possible that the epidemic can't be contained. CGTN Patrick Vog has more from Geneva.
Different location, but same launch date. Carmaker BMW was meant to roll out its new electric coupe at the Geneva Motor Show on Tuesday, but instead it introduced the car via live stream from Munich after the show was cancelled because of the coronavirus.
First of all, we regret that we can't be in Geneva today, but the safety of our people has, of course, our utmost priority.
One event that did go ahead in Switzerland as planned was a two-day IOC Executive Board meeting in Lausanne.
We all are healthy and looking forward to the meeting.
Both the IOC and organisers of the Tokyo Games have said the event will go ahead from July 24th to August 9th. At least that's the status right now, and there's no plan B. At a World Health Organization press briefing, Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus reiterated that containment efforts were working and that many countries are already well prepared because of systems in place to fight influenza.
COVID-19 is also a respiratory pathogen. Those systems can and should and are being adapted for COVID-19.
But the WHO also said that the ability to respond to the crisis was being compromised by the severe and increasing disruption to global supplies of protective equipment because of demand, hoarding and misuse, and it urged stakeholders to manage supply chains effectively.
Meanwhile, the UK outlined its plans to handle the crisis on Tuesday. Behind Italy, France and Germany, Britain's recorded the highest number of infections in Europe. The measures include possible school closures and a ban on large-scale gatherings if transmission of the virus becomes established. Right now, it's categorized under a containment phase.
And the plan has 4 strands: containing the virus, delaying its spread, researching its origins and cure, and finally, mitigating the impact should the virus become more widespread. That is, contain, delay, research, mitigate.
That leaves the remainder of one sporting spectacle unscathed for now. A Six Nations rugby fixture between Ireland and Italy was postponed on Saturday, but organisers of the championship said the rest of the games would go ahead, although they are preparing for potential changes. Patrick Falk, CGTN, Geneva.
South Korea declared war against the coronavirus with government agencies on a 24-hour emergency situation room system. The country's total number of cases is nearing 5,000, the largest outbreak anywhere outside China. South Korea has postponed or canceled events and extended schools or kindergarten breaks. The central bank has warned off negative first quarter growth as the epidemic hits both consumption and exports. President Moon Jae-in said the government will inject within $25 billion to the economy and address the grave situation. As China heads back to work, millions of people are passing by each other again on trains, highways, and other means of transportation. It means virus can be easily spread. But Shanghai authorities are using a big data platform to minimize further risk of the coronavirus spreading. CGTN Lin Nan has more about this from Shanghai.
By road, by rail, and even by air, Shanghai and the rest of China are getting back to work, back to the office, school, and construction site, you name it, but not before checking off some extra details. Shanghai workers report their temperature, travel history, and other information, which then gets sent to a big data platform the authorities use to manage epidemic prevention.
We can see the personnel inflow and movement clearly and know where they stay in the city, especially those who come from worst-hit areas. So we can take measures in some targeted districts and communities to prevent the virus from spreading.
The cross-department data platform combines information collected from police, health authorities, and other government departments, and will alert local community workers to take action if anything warrants it. A neighborhood in Jiangsu Road district was highlighted in the system, and additional help was deployed to local disinfection stations immediately.
We were informed that there are many people returning to Shanghai in this community, so we come here within a few minutes to disinfect more frequently.
Companies need to get approval before staff are allowed to come to work, and local authorities will decide whether the employee can go to the office or should quarantine for a while based on information from the data platform.
L'Oreal applied for about 1,700 employees to return to work, but only about 300 of them were eligible to go back to the office after we checked their information. We told the company to arrange their business based on this situation.
And what the authority of Shanghai did in terms of measures, they were very adequate and very effective, because it's allowed companies like us to be able to assess the situation of each one of them, because each situation of each employee was different. And we have to find a way that we are communicating with them, that we allow them to respect the safety rules, for them to also be able to know when they can come back and how they can work as well.
Authorities say ensuring the health and safety of people is still priority number one, while the city works hard to get businesses and lives back on track. Lin Nan, CGTN, Shanghai.
Turkey shot down a Syrian government warplane on Tuesday over northwest Syria, where fighting has intensified in recent days, bringing Turkish and Russian forces close to direct conflict in the battle over the last swath of Syria still held by rebels. It was the third Syrian warplane Turkey has shot down since Sunday in an escalating campaign against President Bashar al-Assad forces. NATO member Turkey supports the rebels while Assad relies on its superpower ally Russia. Let's take a look.
Another refugee tragedy is unfolding at the Turkish-Greek border. Thousands of migrants have found themselves desperately trying to reach Europe through Turkey. Men, women, children of different nationalities, including Syria, Afghanistan, and Iran, are making an effort to cross into Greece. At the land border near Edirne, Turkey, the UN's International Organization for Migration estimated that at least 13,000 people were attempting to cross from different points. Meanwhile, Greek security forces fired tear gas to push back hundreds amassed at Turkey's Pazarkule border. Some migrants responded by hurling rocks at Greek police, and many of them had slept outside overnight with no tent and little to no food available. One Afghan migrant called on the UN to wake up and see the suffering.
We want a life, and this is every human can make his life. Okay, see this, all children, women, people. Why United Nations? Are you awake or asleep? If you are awake, see this. We are as humanity.
Others had better luck crossing by sea. On Sunday, Greek police stated that several hundred refugees managed to reach the Greek islands of Lesbos, Samos and Chios as they arrived in small boats. The flow of refugees was triggered by Turkey's announcement on Friday that it could no longer prevent refugees from reaching the EU. On Sunday, Turkey's chief of communications Fahrettin Altun stated that Ankara was instead planning for contingencies in case of further inflows from Syria. Turkey's interior minister claimed that over 100,000 refugees were able to cross into Europe over the weekend. Yet Greek officials reject these numbers and say numbers cited by Turkey are misleading.
Those that have entered Greek territory have been arrested and detained. And in my mind, this is an illegal way of entering one country.
But it's clearly
borders.
It's clearly possible to get through.
The EU Border Protection Agency Frontex raised its alarm level to high for all EU borders with Turkey. The EU has also announced it will hold a meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council next week to discuss the latest developments in Idlib, Syria, and at the borders. In the meantime, as long as Turkey's gates are open, it appears thousands of refugees intend to stay at the border, hoping to reach Europe. Nihal Bardavid, CGTN, Istanbul.
The Philippine police ended a 10-hour hostage incident in Metro Manila on Monday, convincing the gunman to free all the hostages and surrendered himself to the authorities. The security guard that was dismissed by his employers released his hostages and surrendered to authorities. Before being subdued by police, the hostage taker aired his grievances against his former superiors. He's accused them of corruption and abuse. His former bosses have publicly apologized. Police said the hostage taker shot a security officer who is in a stable condition. Clashes intensified at the Turkish-Greek border on Wednesday, where thousands of refugees are hopeful of reaching European land after Turkey opened its borders for those who wanted to leave. They stressed the country had to shift its resources from prevention of migration to Europe toward focusing on IDPs and refugees coming from Idlib, according to the country's chief of communications. Meanwhile, some refugees claim they've managed to cross into Greece but were sent back to Turkish borders. CGTN Mikhail Bardavid explains.
On Wednesday, intense clashes took place inside the buffer zone between Turkey's Pazarkule crossing with Greece's Kastanias border. Greek security forces were seen using water cannons, tear gas, and rubber bullets to repel the crowds of refugees, who at times were throwing stones at the guards. The governor of Turkey's Edirne announced 6 refugees had been injured by live ammunition used by Greek police. He said one of the men died at the hospital where he was being treated. Athens denied the claims as fake news and published a video purporting to show Turkish riot police firing tear gas at the Kastanias border crossing. Throughout the day, dozens of refugees continued to arrive here to the Pazarkule border crossing, many of them with blankets in their hands, prepared to stay the night as the weather is getting colder. They're planning to cross the border into the buffer zone where media members are not allowed. Hundreds of other refugees are scattered along the more than 200-kilometer border between the two countries. Some migrants are waiting for Greece to potentially change its stance and open the borders. Others are trying to cross illegally using various methods. This Afghan family, resting on a roadside in Edirne's Ali Bey village, is exhausted. They say they managed to cross the river to Greece by boat, only to be sent back by Greek security forces. They claim Greek police harassed them.
They beat us and shoved us into the water. Then my dad came and pulled us out of the water. Then Greeks came and burned our shoes. They put such misery upon us.
Though the children are mindlessly playing with their toys, the parents are worried for them.
We have lost our way completely. Now these children are spending cold nights outdoors. I'm not going to Europe for money. I'm just going there for comfort and the peace of my children.
Meanwhile, in Ankara, Turkish and EU officials met to discuss the latest crisis at the Turkish-Greek borders. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs Joseph Borrell said the situation at the border was unacceptable and urged Ankara not to encourage further movement of refugees and migrants towards European Union borders. Michal Bardavid, CGTN at the Turkish-Greek border.
This is Asia Outlook broadcasting from Myanmar International Radio. You can visit our website at miradio.com.mm. You can also listen to our radio programs live on the website. India's drug manufacturers are facing a shortage of raw materials due to suspended supply chains in China. The industry imports about 70% of ingredients from its eastern neighbor, but buying has been put on hold since January. The fear of drug shortages and price hikes has intensified in India, although the government says there's enough stock for the next 2 to 3 months. CGTN Ravina Bawa has more from Delhi.
Production of many commonly used medicines could be hit by the end of this month due to the problems with the supply of raw materials. Since the outbreak of coronavirus in China, the supply of active pharmaceutical ingredients or APIs has been disrupted and the pharmaceutical industry is facing the heat.
Yes, there is a shortage, and not only the shortage has created the problem, the further problem has been aggravated by the panic that has been created because the raw material suppliers are hoarding and the people who are buying medicines or getting the medicines manufactured from manufacturers like us, they are also piling up their stocks.
About 70% of APIs in India are imported from China. The rest are manufactured in India, but 80% of the intermediaries needed to produce them are also brought from China. Industry bodies have warned that the pharmaceutical industry is exposed to high risk if the epidemic continues.
They specifically told that what are the drugs that were going to be, out of the market by 20th March and 20th April. It is going in that direction. The major problem is with the anti-cancer drugs, similarly the HIV drugs. After that, the anti-diabetics and antibiotics.
Although the prices have not gone up so far, but chemists fear that in another few months, the customer will have to bear the burden of higher costs for medicines.
If we consider a month, I don't think there would be any impact, as drug manufacturers, they have sufficient quantity of raw materials ordered at their place. And drugs also, we have 3 to 4 months inventory in the market. So, but if it prolongs beyond, say, 4 months, 5 months, then the situation may be bad.
The government has stepped in and has formed a high-level committee to find both short-term and long-term solutions. It has placed pharmaceutical industries under force majeure clauses, freeing pharmaceutical firms from their contractual obligations. This is conclusive evidence that the situation is critical. Ravinder Bawa, CGTN, Delhi.
The WHO is calling for calm after Indonesia confirmed its first coronavirus case on Monday. 2 Indonesians tested positive after coming into contact with an infected Japanese national. Silkina Aluwala in Jakarta tells us more.
First of all, let's talk about the tourism industry, which will definitely be affected by this. So far, the situation here is stable. People are going about their days as usual. Although many residents have resorted to panic buying, President Joko Widodo spoke out against that, saying it's not necessary at all. What we know about the 2 patients is that they are mother and daughter, aged 64 and 31 respectively. Both of them live in the outskirts of Jakarta, about an hour away from the city center. Indonesia's health minister said one of the patients had been sick for about 2 weeks before she decided to test for the virus. They were already under surveillance for about a week or so before they were diagnosed on the 1st of March. On the 14th of February, the patients were in close contact with a Japanese national who's working in Malaysia. The main concern right now is to contain this virus, to not allow it to spread uncontrollably. And although the government has mentioned time and time again that Indonesia is capable of dealing with this virus, hospitals around the country have prepared isolation rooms and have equipment that are of international standards, the World Health Organization did mention that Indonesia should anticipate more cases in the coming days, but the main priority right now is to just reduce the risk of transmission.
COVID-19 cases are trending downward in China, but other countries now have a major battle on their hands. When the outbreak began in China, international aid poured in from around the world. Medical supplies were flown in daily from outreach groups and foreign governments alike. CGTN Lu Suri has more.
COVID-19 cases are trending downward in China, but other countries now have a major battle on their hands. When outbreak began in China, international aid poured in from around the world. Medical supplies were flown in daily from outreach groups and foreign governments alike.
We relied primarily on our own efforts to respond to the outbreak, and we are grateful to the international community for its sincere assistance. We always said that the outbreak would be temporary, but friendship and cooperation are long-lasting. The sympathy and support of the international community will live on in Chinese people's hearts and minds.
China is returning the favor. Officials say the nation's discovery of the genetic sequence, which is shared with the world at an early stage of the outbreak, will help countries like Italy and Iran in their own fights against the virus. China will continue its openness and transparency in sharing information and experiences.
China is working actively with other countries in epidemic control and will continue to cooperate in areas including diagnostics, therapeutics, drugs, and vaccine development. We will never forget the help given by the international communities, and we will provide help to countries in need to the best of our ability.
Ma says the fate of countries in fighting the virus is intertwined. The war against COVID-19 needs a lot of international cooperation, which is in full force around the clock and around the world. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Beijing.
China has slammed a comment made by a Fox News host who demanded that the country formally apologize for the novel coronavirus epidemic.
It is unreasonable to demand China to apologize for the coronavirus outbreak. So far, there's been no clear conclusion about the origin of the virus. No matter where the virus came from, China, like every other country that's facing the epidemic, is the victim. In 2009, the H1N1 flu broke out in the United States and soon spread to 214 countries and regions, causing at least 18,449 deaths in that year alone. Did anyone ask the U.S. for an apology? China's power, efficiency, and speed in fighting the epidemic have been widely praised by the international community. Chinese people have made great contributions and huge sacrifices to safeguard the health and safety of the world population.
South Koreans who suspect they have symptoms of the deadly coronavirus can now get tested at drive-through centers, where they can do the procedure without leaving their cars.
안심카 선별진료소는 가장 좋은 장점은 의심 증상을 가지신 분들이 복잡한 또 감염 우려가 있는 선별진료소를 방문하지 않고 본인이 차를 타고
And that's all we have for today's Asia Outlook on MI Radio. Thank you for being with us. I'm Melody. We'll be back next week. Until next time.